Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. So I realised about a year ago today, almost to the day that I'm filming this, I put a video out asking for your most controversial Formula One takes, your dodgy takes. Because look, the world would be a very boring place if we all agreed on everything, right? But obviously a year is a very long time in Formula One, so I thought we'd do this again. I put the call out on Twitter, on YouTube community, asking for your dodgiest F1 opinions, and I'm gonna see what I think of them. And of course, I've got no doubt some of you just came up with these mad, because some of these takes are so ridiculous that I can't possibly begin to believe that you actually believe them. So well done if you've made a video with a lie. And of course, be sure to stick your dodgy F1 opinions down in the comments below. I'll do my best to get through as many as I can and tell you what I think. And one last thing, before we get into the meat and bones of the video, we've got to talk about today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've said this many a time before and I'll say it again, Squarespace couldn't make it easier to build your very own website, portfolio, blog, online store from scratch. The thing is though, just like the Formula One game, to get started is pretty easy, right, with Squarespace and the F1 game, but the skill ceiling that you can potentially get to is very high. So maybe you're looking for the Yano Opmir of Squarespace website development to help you push those limits. Well, Squarespace makes it super easy to find them with an inbuilt directory of vetted experts that cover a broad range of styles and scales. And that also means if you get quality at building websites on Squarespace, then that could potentially be another little income stream, helping other people bring their ideas to life. So if you're interested, head to squarespace.com, see what's what. Look, there's no payment needed to get started. It's only when you want to push your website actually live to the world. You can play around with the functionality as much as you like without spending a penny. And then when you are ready to go live, use the code TOMMOF1 or give the link at the top line of the description a tap for 10% off your first website or domain. Big up Squarespace once again. Now back to the video. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to start with the YouTube community responses and then we'll get into the tweets because the tweets are always going to be spicier, aren't they? Let's be real. Starting off with Prism Mike, who again, just for note, has Sebastian Vettel bow into his Red Bull in 2013 as his profile picture. Max is overrated and Stroll would beat him in the same car. Now look, this is one of them that I don't believe that you actually believe this is true. Come on. On what basis are you saying this, Mike? Max consistently slaps up his teammate. Stroll got smashed by Sergio last year. Come on, Mike. Come on. Next, we have Hushed Bacon YT. Vettel is better than Hamilton. Now, obviously, for the period that Vettel was winning, I'd argue yes. I think he was for that period of time. But when you take a whole entire career into perspective and look at the fall off from Seb in the last couple of years, I completely disagree. Given the right hardware in the right circumstance, Vettel can be as good as Lewis, if not better, but Lewis is able to extract performance out of pretty much anything he drives because he hasn't always had the fastest car. That is a myth. Next we have Nathan Saxon. Post 2006 Alonso is incredibly overrated. To be fair, 2007 Alonso made a lot of mistakes. Hamilton looked like the experienced driver that season, I think, even though it was his rookie year. But no, the fact that Alonso was able to extract so much performance out of that dog of a Ferrari back in the early 2010s, and the performances he got out of that 2017 McLaren when he was there, nah, I completely disagree. I think Alonso's top tier. His personality has rubbed me up the wrong way a few times, but in terms of pure talent on track, he's one of the best. Admech Skitari, Maldonado was faster than Checo. That's an interesting one because I've got to be honest, when we're talking fast, we're talking purely pace. I think Maldonado's pace ceiling is probably higher than Checo's because Checo's always been very good in race. His qualifying hasn't been his speciality. Maldonado, on his day, was rapid. He's just crashed a lot. They're kind of like opposites, but more extreme because I think Maldonado's pace, its peak was higher than Checo's, but his race performance was absolutely buzzed. Don't get me wrong. In terms of a total package, I think Checo is one of the best drivers in Formula One right now when you consider everything. Ganapathy submarine. Vettel will be a disappointment in Aston Martin and will be replaced by Alex Albon. I had to put this one in here because of Alex. I mean, again, disappointment is relative to expectations. I think expectations with Seb going to Aston should be held back a bit because he has come off a poor season at Ferrari. Do I think he'll be replaced by Alex? Absolutely not. I think that Vettel's in there for at least 2 seasons. He's shown glimmers at times of being quicker than Stroll in certain circumstances. I mean, I don't think he'll be replaced by Alex. Next from Albin Varghese. This is a long one, right? The growth of F1 and the rise of new casual fans has increased a lot of hate and toxic behaviour into the community. Drivers are ridiculed and bullied on insane levels. This includes the hate on Bottas, Grosjean, Latifi. Casual fans are also downplaying the risks and pressure of F1 driver team via hate on social media. Okay, let's start with toxic behaviour. I mean, toxic behaviour I don't think comes from casual fans. It comes from toxic fans. And I think you can have toxic fans who are casuals. You can have toxic fans who are super diehard gatekeepers as well. So I don't think that's exclusive to casual fans. I do obviously think with Twitter you can, say what you like. You can create a faceless platform and you don't have to worry about pushback. You know what I mean? Like, most people on Twitter aren't putting their actual identity attached to their tweets. Drivers are ridiculed or bullied to insane. I mean, look, this isn't just an F1 thing. This is just a sport thing. I mean, you look at football Twitter, like the amount of stick that players get, and a lot of it goes over a line. But even then, like if someone has a bad race, I think we're entitled to talk about it because we're invested in the sport. But at the same time, when it goes to like personal attacks and really goes too deep, then it's just a bit... there is a line there, but it's very difficult to kind of know where that line is sometimes. The casual fans are also downplaying the risks and pressure of an F1 driver. I mean, yeah, I guess I think it's difficult for anyone who hasn't been in a racing car, and even more so anyone who hasn't raced in Formula One. Like, all the eyeballs on you, it is easy to forget that they're just human beings as well. You know what I mean? Like, we're all just people, and some people get opportunities and some people get breaks and do well in life, but that doesn't make them any less of a human being who has feelings and emotions and takes things on. So next, we have Sam Lee. One of the 2021 backmarker teams, Williams or Haas, will be challenging for World Constructors' Championship, or at the very least third in 2022. Now, I've talked about this with Williams. With Haas, I don't think so. I don't think, as much as Dimitri Mazepin could put money into that team, I don't think the facility is there at Haas. But then I say that, I don't know, because they did great in 2018. They finished 5th in the Constructors. So maybe, but I feel like Williams has got that name, that heritage, that they've got the factory. I don't know. I feel more confident in Williams than Haas moving forward. But I do agree that there's definitely going to be a big shake-up from... maybe not from next year, maybe from next year. I think there will be a shake-up amongst the kind of mid to lower field from next year. But I still think it will be Mercedes and Red Bull at the top from 22 onwards. At least for the first few years. I just realised that I've picked 2 from the same person. Sorry, but Adamet, you're welcome, mate. Checo isn't underperforming at Red Bull. He has less experience driving a completely different car architecture. People just want to keep up the curse of the second seat joke as much as possible. Yeah, there's definitely a degree of truth in this. I mean, underperforming, like that as a word, means like you underperform relative to your expectations. And I think a lot of people's expectations of Checo, of all the new drivers coming into new cars this year, was inflated by a lot of people online. I think Checo is exactly where I expected him to be coming into that team, where he's at kind of Alex Albon levels. But again, I've said this before, the difference is because Checo's got all this experience and he will get more comfortable and used to the car, I feel like he's going to get there. Yes, he has a lot of experience in Formula One, but the last, 7-8 years has been at Racing Point / Force India. So, he's got used to that car architecture. Like Admech says, getting into a new car, it's going to take a bit. It's 4 races, everyone. At time of recording anyway. It's 4 races we've had. But at the same time, the second seat curse, I still think is a thing because Max is so good and so in tune with that car. And the fact that Sainz, for example, can jump into that Ferrari and be almost as quick as Charles straight away. Again, 2007, Lewis jumps into that McLaren alongside Fernando Alonso, 2-time world title winner, straight away on pace. The fact that Checo can't do the same with all the experience he's got tells me that there is still a fundamental issue at that Red Bull team. Katasadi, we have seen how Netflix portrayed Christian Horner as someone who always stirs the pot, but in my opinion, Toto is actually the one who does it more just behind the scenes. I mean, I definitely agree that, Toto is as culpable of, stirring the pot, as you put it, as Christian is 100%. They're both top wind-up merchants. They know exactly what they're doing. But part of me thinks they probably do it for the spectacle as much as anything, because I reckon they've got a pretty good relationship. I reckon they go for dinner a couple of times a year, chat about all things home life. I think they get along pretty well, and then they drop these little comments in just to wind each other up. I think it's all good banter. I do enjoy the relationship between them two. I think they're good crack. Helmut Marko, on the other hand, he just seems to kind of just say things all the time. Just random things that undermine drivers, which I don't like as much. Michael Posh says Kvyat is one of the most underrated drivers in F1 history. It's 15 upvotes as well. The thing is with Daniel Kvyat, it's difficult to say, because if Max Verstappen had never come about, where would Daniel be now? Like, genuine question. He beat Daniel Ricciardo in his first year at the team. If Verstappen hadn't come in, if Kvyat had kept that seat, who knows where he'd have been? What I will say though is, if Kvyat was so good, why did he get so convincingly beat by Pierre last season? Towards the end of the year, yes, he had a couple of good performances, but overall, Pierre very much had the measure of Daniel. It's one of them stories of kind of what could have been if the cards fell in a slightly different order. And then on to Twitter. Look, I don't know if Guigo Frigo is Michael Posh's Twitter account, but Kvyat is one of the most underrated drivers in recent F1 history. Same sentiment. So clearly there's quite a few of you out there who agree with this one. Invested Puppy 47 says, I'm going to get slaughtered for this, but Senna is overrated and Prost was a better and more complete driver than him. Imo, if he didn't die so soon, he wouldn't be held in the same regard as he is now. First of all, obviously Senna's one of the greatest of all time. There's no doubt about that. One of the greatest of all time. Of course he is. The thing is though, the point that you raise about the fact that he died at his peak 100% affects the way that a driver is perceived. Of course it does. In the same way that when, Antoine Hubert died, we were all thinking, oh, what could have been? And when Jules Bianchi died, we were thinking, oh, what could have been? But ultimately, your perception is skewed in a more positive way because of that unknown and because of the tragedy of the situation. I agree that Prost, for me, was the more complete driver. I think Senna edged it in pace, but that's just one element of what it takes to be a great racing driver. Hence all the titles Prost won. But in the same breath, Senna won plenty of titles and firmly on merit because he was so quick. Also as well, Senna had such a big fan base, not only in Brazil, but throughout the world. And again, when a driver is loved, kind of like how Sebastian Vettel right now, if Seb was hated by everyone, if people didn't like Seb as a personality, no one would be giving him the benefit of the doubt that a lot of his fans are right now to his performances. I think that's very fair to say. Next, we've got James NS. Russell's overtake on Bottas in Sakir was massively overrated. It's one of them that, so I don't think it should have got overtake of the year. I 100% think Gasly's overtake on Perez at Spa, just where Perez squeezed him so much and he was just like, nope, I'm taking this gap, mate. Especially going up Rally on Eau Rouge, where his mate had died the previous year. There was just something special about that overtake. What made the Bottas-Russell overtake so good, obviously, was the story. Yes, there was a massive tyre difference, so Russell had way more grip than Valtteri. But that wasn't a place that people typically overtook. So I understand why people were gassed by it, but I agree that, the overtake itself wasn't as good as it was made out to be. It wasn't the overtake of the year for me. LN2_official. I'm about to commit a war crime. I don't think none of the new boys in F1, Lando, Carlos, George, Albon, Gasly, Schumacher, Tsunoda, Leclerc and Gio are even half as good as someone like Vettel or Lewis. Max, Ocon and Stroll are better than these guys. Wow, okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Leclerc isn't even half as good as someone like Vettel. I mean, Leclerc, you can't put in that, I'm sorry. Lando, look at Lando right now, the way he's driving. Nah. Carlos as well? Nah. I'm sorry. I massively disagree with this. The war crime has been committed. But again, it's like when we're saying as good, obviously, like Charles pretty convincingly beat Sebastian in the same car at Ferrari. And they say the first thing you got to do is beat your teammate. Like, obviously, if we're talking about Seb at his prime, he was amazing. Max, I'd agree. Yeah, Max and Lewis are on top now. Ocon, I mean, I love Esteban, but I wouldn't say Ocon's better than Leclerc. No. No. And Stroll, better than Lando, Carlos, George, Leclerc. Stroll better... No. I don't believe that you actually believe this. I'm sorry. I can't believe that. Rahul C. Ocon right now is a much better fit for Merck than Russell. He's got experience in a more competitive team and he's proven himself against quality teammates, matching Checo and Daniel towards the end of last season, making easy with Nando this year. He is the best choice right now. 14 likes to that as well. Yeah, I mean, again, the reason I've backed Ocon from the start this year is because I think he was like very harshly critiqued last season. Again, when you consider all of the context to why Ricciardo was quicker than him, Ricciardo had an extra season in the car. Ricciardo is amazing. He's a 7-time race winner for a reason. Ocon had a year out, new team, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a lot of reasons why it wasn't great at the start of the year. But you got to remember, Ocon technically got the highest finish of any Renault driver last year with his P2 at Sakir. But everyone forgets about that P2 at Sakir because of Checo. And you make a great point. The teammates he's raced against, Alonso, Perez, Ricciardo, 3 of modern F1's most stalwart quality drivers. He held his own against Checo. He's very much holding his own against Alonso right now. But again, Alonso needs time to get used to the car, which is fair. And Ricciardo, again, by the end of the year, Ocon had pretty much caught him up. I still think Russell's got more raw pace and potential. But again, it's very difficult. Ocon's gone between midfield teams. Russell's stayed at the same bottom team. It's difficult to compare their performances. I think they're both quality. I feel like George would be more uncompromising driving alongside Lewis than Ocon. I think Ocon would be a better teammate to Lewis. I don't know. It's a good point though. I definitely think now that Ocon's really showing his worth, people are starting to think, oh, okay, maybe that's not the only option. Maybe George isn't the only option for Mercedes. Still managed by Toto as well, so stranger things have happened. Jumping James Pearce to Pred Pearce. Vettel is finished in the sport and is only clinging on to his 4 world championships. More Seb slander. I'm sorry, Seb fans. Do I think he's finished in the sport? No, I don't think he's finished in the sport. I still think he's got a lot to offer. But again, the thing is with Seb, I just feel like he needs all of the components around him to be just to his liking. Can you hear my tummy rumbling? For him to extract everything. And when he does, on his day, he's phenomenal. There will always be the argument, yeah, but you don't lose your talent overnight. But again, it's like talent exists in a lot of people. And it's like being able to unlock that talent. For some people, it's very easy to do that. For others, it's more difficult. A driver like Fernando, a driver like Lewis can jump in to pretty much any car and drive it quickly, almost straight away. Seb's a driver that drives off confidence, and when he's not confident in the package, it reflects in his performances. We know it's a long-term thing with Aston Martin. I hope they give him a car that he can deliver in, because we know Seb at his best is pretty unbeatable. And he's not even that old. He's still only like 32. He's got plenty of time left in the sport, I think. It's just if he wants it. We know Seb's not on social media. He loves his home, family life. He loves bees. He's got his things, kind of like Lewis, in a different way. Outside of F1, I don't think he's as reliant on keeping in the sport and staying in that space than, say, Fernando is, for example. I can't see Seb in the sport in his 40s. Let's just say that. Ayan Jana. Mazepin was actually a decent driver, but the off-season has screwed up his head and affected his skills. Not that I'm complaining. The thing is with Mazepin, look, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, like, he's clearly got some talent there. You don't win races in Formula 2, which he did, without talent. Yes, he finished 5th, but ultimately it was a pretty close title. Like, he wasn't, if he got another win, maybe he might have been a bit higher up. I can't remember exactly. I definitely think that the gap between him and Mick now is bigger than it was between him and Mick in Formula 2. Mazepin was much closer to Mick in Formula 2. Right now in Formula 1, he's really struggling. Like, I don't like the guy, but at the end of the day, the stuff that has happened over the break, that's clearly affected him on track, and probably off track as well, let's be real. The thing is, 4 races in, he's made colossal mistakes at every single race that has affected not just him, but drivers around him. Does this happen for all 23 races this year? And we're just like, yeah, but he might not have got the penalty point, so he like surely there has to be a line, surely. From Taylor Louise, Tills, good to see you, mate. Ricciardo will never get a championship. That ship has sadly sailed. He deserves one. He's one of the best alongside Hamilton and Vettel, but those guys dominated during his era. Yeah, I mean, I love Danny Rick, and I know he's got the ability. I know if you gave him the quickest car, I think he would be up there consistently with it. I think he'd extract everything out of that package. I kind of agree that it depends on McLaren. Ultimately, it depends on the team. It's a team sport. Whether he wins a driver's title or not is down to McLaren. And he's obviously put faith in that McLaren project long term. Would he have been better staying at Alpine? Difficult to say. I think McLaren is probably the better move. He wished he'd made the move 2 years earlier. I do think Daniel on his day is phenomenal. He's right up there with the best in Formula 1 right now. But I also think the ship might have sailed as well, sadly. Cheyenne Kurohi. Montoya was one of the best drivers back in his prime, 2001 to 5, and could have been a world champion. If not for reliability issues with Williams, he was far better than Kimi pre-2005. I think Montoya is a massively overlooked driver. He was so good. I loved Juan Pablo. He had that performance, but he also had that character and that personality. I think JPM was phenomenal F1 driver. Such a shame he didn't get a world title. He thoroughly deserved it, I think. I completely agree. With this one. This is a beautiful take. Praise the Goose says Max Verstappen is the most overrated driver in F1 history and has done nothing to deserve the popularity he has. I mean, again, overrated. Where do you think people perceive Max, and then where do you perceive Max relative to that? Because for me, he jumped in to a Red Bull at the age of 18 and won his very first race at Catalonia. Yes, of course, he relied on the Mercedes crashing into each other. Podium then, first race. Consistently destroying his teammates. Right up there at the sharp end with Lewis. Come on. I mean, I guess the popularity he gets from being Dutch, if he was Belgian, which he was born in Belgium, we know you crazy Dutch love a bit of Max Verstappen, but if he wasn't Dutch, would you love him as much? If he was from Switzerland, would he have the same massive fan base? Probably not. Nische says, Bottas is an underrated driver. People would praise him after he's gone, just like Hulk. His raw pace is not the greatest, but his quality is real good. And being that near to Lewis on a one-level pace is incredible. I've got to agree with the fact that Bottas' one-lap pace is very, very good. Very good. The fact that he gets as close to Lewis as he does, as consistently as he does. Yes, sometimes he's a bit off, but, sometimes he beats Lewis. I agree that Bottas is a great one-lap merchant. But in terms of the race, over the years at Mercedes, he's only won, 9 races, I think? Which is less than Max Verstappen's won in his whole career. And he's been in the fastest car the whole time. But what I will say is that, again, we're comparing Valtteri to arguably the greatest of all time. Whether you think Lewis is or not, you've got to say he is definitely up there. So it's hard for me to judge Valtteri. Like, where would he sit if everyone had the exact same car? Would he be comfortably in the midfield? Yes. Would he be at the top of the midfield? Probably. But he just doesn't have that X factor to be at Lewis's level. But then who does, apart from Max? No one. Maybe Charles. On that basis, I would agree that he is underrated because, and I'm very critical of Valtteri because he is consistently being slapped up by Lewis. But you need the best drivers for the best teams, and Valtteri's a great driver, but he's not a great driver. You know what I'm saying? Silver Saigo says, the Yuki hype is absolute BS. Alex Albon should have got the seat, would have done 100% better job. Would he have done a better job than Yuki? Yes. Is that because he's had, he'd be coming into his 3rd year in Formula 1? Yes. I've said this before, Yuki's very raw. He's got pace there, but he's very, very raw. He's a very emotional character. Sometimes it gets the better of him. He needs to mature as a driver, and he will do as time goes on, because he's the youngest driver in Formula 1 right now. Obviously, if you didn't have a young Japanese Red Bull Academy driver who did very, very well in Formula 2 last year, I've no doubt Alex would have just gone down to AlphaTauri and taken that seat. But, you know, Red Bull had to go with Yuki. It was always going to happen. Alex Albon will only get back into Formula One through that AlphaTauri team. You know, will Pierre stay on beyond this year? Will he be offered something elsewhere? Maybe Alex could slot in. Circumstance and opportunity could get in the way of Alex ever getting back into Formula One, which would break my heart. But that's the sport for you. Again, I do back Yuki's pace, but I do think the hype and the expectation has been set too high for him. I agree with that. Nadig Jordan says Latifi is underrated and is closer to Russell than we think. Again, is it one of those where we're comparing a good driver to a phenomenal driver? It depends on how well you rate Russell. I think Russell's quality, I think he's like world championship material, 100%. In the same way that, is it unfair to go too hard on Valtteri because he's racing against Lewis? Is it too hard to go on Latifi because he's against Russell? But then Russell has completely demolished him in qualifying. Even that one quali session where Nicholas went quicker in Q1, George still ended up higher up the grid, so he still won qualifying. And obviously, good one-lap pace is indicative of performance. And George does typically finish ahead of Nicholas, has had more opportunities to get in the points. Yes, I know he's bottled them as well, but just to be in that conversation in a Williams, I think sometimes when we criticise George for, oh, he's a bottle merchant, blah, 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 like, you've got to remember the car that he's in. Come on, that Williams, I'm sorry, is terrible right now. Yet he's still able to potentially get into the points with it. I mean, I know Nicky technically got closer last year, but didn't he finish 11th in Mugello where most of the field retired? I mean, even Alex got a podium. That's how many people retired. Do I think he's underrated though? No, I disagree. Lucas Ward says, Jenson Button in his prime was a stronger and more complete driver than Fernando Alonso in his prime. Whew. The Spanish fans are not going to be happy with you, Lucas. I don't agree. Button was phenomenal in changeable conditions, but I don't think Button ever had that outright pace that Fernando did. To be fair, Button in his prime, I think, is overlooked because Button in his prime was quality, but not better than Fernando, I'm sorry. Sean Witten. Lance Stroll is underrated. He's probably better than half the grid and get unnecessary crap because his dad owns the team. Ocon should probably get the Merc seat ahead of Russell. Finally, Lewis will probably win the F1 title in an F2 car. I'm guessing the final point is a throwaway point. Okay, obviously Lewis isn't winning the F1 title in an F2 car. Half the grids. Lance Stroll, underrated, probably beats half the grid. Do I think he's better than Lewis, Max, Charles, George, Lando, Daniel, Perez? I'm forgetting so many drivers here. Carlos. I mean, to be fair, I think Lance is probably in the middle. So technically better than half the grid. If he's in the middle, yeah, he's better than all the 9 drivers below him. I do think he still gets unnecessary stick because his dad owns the team. But again, when he first came into F1, he wasn't at the level. But his dad bought him the time to improve as a Formula 1 driver. And now he's very good. And that's it, all done, finished. This was a very long video. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you all for watching. Again, let me know your spicy takes in the opinions. In the comments down below. What am I doing? Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I do appreciate all their support. Their support helps me continue to do what I do. Also, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell as well so you don't miss any of my uploads. It's been a pleasure as always. My name is Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.